In the summer of 1940, the sky above Britain became more than mere atmosphere. It became a battlefield upon which the fate of the free world would hinge. The Battle of Britain was not merely a clash of air forces, it was the confrontation between two competing philosophies of war, two ways of thinking about speed, endurance, and human resilience. The machines that fought it, the men who piloted them, and the engineers who designed them together created a struggle unlike any before. And in that struggle, one man's courage would burn so brightly it would become legend: Flight Lieutenant James Brindley Nicolson. His story begins not in the flames of combat, but in the workshops of British engineering, where an aircraft named the Hawker Hurricane was born. To understand Nicolson's heroism, one must first understand the machine that carried him into the skies that day. The Hurricane, though often overshadowed by the sleeker, more glamorous Spitfire, was in many ways the true backbone of the Royal Air Force. Its story began in the early 1930s with an engineer named Sidney Cam, chief designer at Hawker Aircraft. Cam was a practical man, not given to flamboyant design or theoretical abstractions. He once remarked, "A fighter must not only fly fast, it must be fixed fast." It was this philosophy that shaped the Hurricane's creation. The Hurricane represented the perfect transition from the biplane era to the modern age of monoplane fighters. It combined the sturdy, fabric-covered construction of the biplanes with a powerful Rolls-Royce Merlin engine, a marvel of British engineering that would define the next decade of aerial warfare. The early prototype, first flown in 1935, embodied Cam's guiding principle: durability before delicacy. It could be built quickly, repaired easily, and flown by men trained for war, not air shows. When the Hurricane entered service in 1937, Britain possessed a fighter that was not only fast for its time, reaching over 320 miles per hour, but also reliable, stable, and forgiving to its pilot. The genius of the Hurricane lay in its construction. Where the Spitfire used an advanced monocoque frame made from stressed aluminum, the Hurricane retained a more traditional steel tube skeleton covered in fabric and light metal panels. Critics saw it as old-fashioned. Engineers and ground crews saw it as a blessing. In the heat of war, when repair time could mean the difference between victory and annihilation, a damaged Hurricane could be patched in hours. A new section of wing, a piece of doped fabric, a handful of bolts, and the machine was ready to fly again. This practicality would prove invaluable during the Battle of Britain, when squadrons fought multiple sorties per day under relentless German attack. But while Britain prepared its defenses, the Luftwaffe across the Channel refined its own designs for air superiority. Among them was the Messerschmitt Bf 110, a twin-engine heavy fighter meant to dominate the skies through sheer firepower. Unlike the nimble Bf 109 or the British interceptors, the Bf 110 was conceived as a Zerstörer, or destroyer, an aircraft that could escort bombers and cut through enemy formations with cannons and machine guns. Its creators envisioned a future where speed and range replaced maneuverability. On paper it was impressive: twin Daimler-Benz engines, a top speed near 350 miles per hour, heavy armament, and a crew of 2. Yet, as history would prove, what looked powerful on the drafting board often struggled in the chaos of real combat. The Hurricane's comparative simplicity was its greatest hidden advantage. It was a fighter born from Britain's industrial limitations but refined by its strategic sense. The nation could not afford to build fragile perfection. It needed dependable strength. The Hurricane's wide wings and thick airfoil gave it stability in turns and needed an exceptionally steady gun platform. Pilots praised its handling: predictable, sturdy, and controllable even under strain. It could outturn the Bf 109 and 110, though not outrun them. In the hands of a disciplined pilot, it was a hunter's aircraft, one that punished overconfidence. When the Luftwaffe turned its fury upon southern England in July 1940, the Hurricane squadrons were the first line of defense. Of every 10 British fighters in the air, 6 were Hurricanes. While the Spitfires met the escorting fighters high above, the Hurricanes dove into the bomber streams, 12 guns roaring, shredding Heinkels and Dorniers with precise bursts. It was exhausting, perilous work. In these mid-level attacks, visibility was poor, and the odds were always grim. But the Hurricane could take damage that would have downed a Spitfire. Its thick wings and simple structure absorbed punishment. More than once, a pilot limped back with half a rudder missing or bullet holes through the fuselage, landing safely in a battered but living machine. It was into this world of endurance and attrition that James Brindley Nicolson flew. Born in 1917 in Hampstead, London, Nicolson joined the Royal Air Force as a young man drawn by both adventure and duty. By 1940, at just 23 years old, he had earned a reputation as a disciplined pilot, methodical in his tactics, calm under pressure. He served with No. 249 Squadron, based at Boscombe Down, one of the many airfields defending Britain's southern coast. In August of that year, the Luftwaffe intensified its assaults, targeting not only radar stations and convoys, but also the airfields themselves. Nicholson's squadron would soon find itself directly in the path of one of these strikes. The Hawker Hurricane was not a marvel of speed or grace, it was a triumph of practicality. Its internal skeleton of high-tensile steel tubing, braced by wooden formers, and wrapped in doped Irish linen, gave it a ruggedness that modern fighters had already begun to abandon. It was a design rooted in the philosophy that combat conditions would punish elegance but reward endurance. Engineers knew that Britain's dispersed network of small factories could not produce the Spitfire's delicate aluminum monocoque in sufficient numbers. What they could build, however, was the Hurricane, a fighter that could be riveted, stitched, and welded by ordinary craftsmen and repaired by ground crews working with hammers and doped cloth, instead of precision jigs. Its heart was the Rolls-Royce Merlin III, a liquid-cooled V12 engine delivering about 1,030 horsepower at takeoff. It drove a three-bladed constant-speed propeller, giving the aircraft reliable thrust across a wide speed range. The engine's supercharger provided consistent power even as the Hurricane climbed beyond 15,000 feet, where thinner air strangled lesser machines. But what made the Merlin remarkable was its smooth torque delivery. Pilots could throttle up without the violent swing that plagued earlier fighters, allowing for tight, stable turns in dogfights. Mechanics praised its modularity. Cylinder heads, pumps, and radiators could be swapped in the field, an engineering decision that mirrored Cam's philosophy. On the morning of August 16, 1940, the air above Southampton shimmered with the metallic glint of sunlight off aircraft. The Luftwaffe had launched the coordinated raid on the city's docks and factories, key supply lines for Britain's war effort. At 6,000 feet, Nicholson and his flight were vectored toward an incoming formation. Below, civilians glanced upward at the faint drone of engines, unaware they were witnessing one of the defining moments of aerial warfare. As the Hurricanes climbed through scattered clouds, the radio crackled, "Bandits, 12 o'clock high." The first contact came quickly. Messerschmitt Bf 110s were escorting Heinkel bombers toward the coast. The German heavy fighters, with their long noses and twin engines, gleamed like predators in the sun. The Hurricanes broke formation and dove, their Merlin engines howling. The air became a crossfire of tracer rounds and vapor trails. Within seconds, the sky dissolved into chaos, one of the many swirling dogfights that characterized the Battle of Britain. And at its heart, James Nicholson would face a test few men could imagine. The initial exchange was brutal. Nicholson fired at a passing Bf 110, seeing pieces shear away from its wing before it banked sharply into cloud cover. He began to climb again when a burst of cannon fire slammed into his cockpit from above. The impact tore through his canopy, and flames erupted around his legs and hands. The smell of burning fabric and fuel filled the air. His first instinct was to bail out. Every second inside meant agony. But then, through the shimmering distortion of fire, he saw movement. Another Messerschmitt was diving away below him, damaged but alive. At that moment, instinct met duty. Nicholson's hands, seared by the heat, tightened on the control column. His boots began to blister, his oxygen mask melting against his face. Yet he pressed the firing trigger once more. The Hurricane, now a fireball in motion, followed the German aircraft downward. The 8 Brownings roared again, and the Bf 110 shuddered, smoke pouring from its engines before it spiraled earthward. Only then did Nicholson unfasten his harness, open the canopy, and throw himself into the slipstream. His uniform was alight as he fell, the wind extinguishing the flames only as he tumbled through the air. He landed heavily in a field, alive but badly burned. The local home guard, on edge and confused, mistook him for an enemy pilot and opened fire before realizing their error. When the truth emerged, so too did the scale of his courage. Nicholson had deliberately stayed inside a burning aircraft to finish his attack, an act so rare and selfless that even his commanders were astonished. He would become the only fighter command pilot awarded the Victoria Cross during the Battle of Britain. It was, in essence, the story of the Hurricane itself: courage through endurance, strength through simplicity. Every component of the Hurricane was designed for wartime practicality. The wide undercarriage made takeoffs and landings forgiving, especially on uneven grass fields. Its thick wings provided an exceptionally steady firing platform, a crucial advantage when targeting bombers. The 8.303 Browning machine guns, mounted 4 per wing, produced a concentration of fire that no other fighter matched in 1940. A 2-second burst hurled more than a pound of lead toward the target, enough to shred aluminum skin and detonate fuel tanks. That balance of simplicity and stability shaped Nicholson's battle on that August morning. When cannon shells from the Bf-110 struck his Hurricane, the structure absorbed more punishment than an all-metal airframe likely would have. The fabric skin burned ferociously, but the underlying frame held together long enough for him to make his final attack run. In those seconds, the engineering decisions of CAM and Rolls-Royce engineers became the difference between fleeting opportunity and decisive action. To appreciate Nicholson's courage, one must step into the cockpit, at the moment the sky dissolved into chaos. The Hurricane's cockpit was a cramped compartment of steel and glass, no larger than a telephone booth. The pilot sat strapped within an armored seat plate, surrounded by instruments, airspeed indicator, boost gauge, fuel pressure, compass, and the single gun sight glimmering on a cowling. Visibility was limited. The thick canopy frames obscured much of the rear arc, forcing pilots to twist constantly to check their SIGs. Communication came through crackling radio sets that often failed under strain. In such conditions, combat was not choreography but instinct. As Nicholson rolled into the attack, his Merlin engine roared at full power, propeller tips just shy of supersonic. The 8 Brownings vibrated the airframe with a heavy metallic thrum. His target, the Messerschmitt Bf-110, was formidable in appearance: twin engines, a long fuselage, and a rear gunner whose job was to ward off attackers. But the Hurricane's tighter turning circle allowed Nicholson to position himself beneath the German fighter's blind spot. He squeezed the trigger, sending a stream of tracer fire that arced upward into the Messerschmitt's port engine. Smoke trailed from it as the aircraft broke away. Then came the counterstrike. From above and behind, another Bf-110 opened fire. 2-centimeter cannon shells ripped through the Hurricane's fuselage, puncturing the fuel tank and shattering the canopy. In an instant, Nicholson's world became flame. Aviation fuel ignited at his feet. The heat blistered the paint from the instrument panel. The smell of burning rubber filled the cockpit, mingling with the acrid tang of cordite. Training dictated immediate escape. Yet when Nicholson glimpsed the damaged German fighter still limping below, a moment of calculation overtook instinct. If he bailed now, the enemy would survive to kill again. If he stayed, his chances of survival were almost nil. He chose to fight. He pushed the control column forward, flames licking at his gloves. The Merlin howled as he dived, airspeed rising past 300 miles per hour. His eyes watered in the heat, skin blistered on his hands. He lined up the Bf-110 in the reflector sight and pressed the firing stud. The Hurricane shuddered with recoil as the German aircraft erupted in smoke and flame, plunging toward the fields below. Only when his ammunition emptied did Nicholson release the stick, unbuckle, and throw himself into the rushing air. He tumbled downward, spinning through wind and smoke, his uniform still smoldering. The burning Hurricane disintegrated above him. Against all probability, his parachute deployed. He struck the ground alive, battered, but victorious. The airflow dynamics of the Hurricane also played a role. Its broad wings created high lift at low speeds, allowing controlled flight even when damaged. Many pilots reported limping home with half their control surfaces shot away. During Nicholson's dive, those same broad wings gave him stability to aim despite the inferno around him. Engineers had not designed it for heroics, but the physics of its shape gave him a fleeting window in which heroism could exist. In contrast, the Messerschmitt Bf-110 was beginning to show the weaknesses of its concept. Its twin engines generated immense torque, making it stable in a straight line but sluggish in roll. In combat against single-engine fighters, that sluggishness proved fatal. The German crews relied on teamwork, flying in tight defensive formations where rear gunners could cover each other's blind spots. But once separated, a lone Bf-110 was easy prey for Hurricanes. German reports from August 1940 lamented that the Zerstörer is helpless when alone. Nicholson's victory, therefore, was not an isolated act of chance. It was a microcosm of the entire air campaign. By mid-August 1940, Fighter Command had learned to exploit the Hurricane's strengths deliberately. Specfire squadrons were tasked with engaging escorting Bf-109s at higher altitude, while hurricanes dove into the bomber streams below. The coordination demanded from radar operators, ground controllers, and squadron leaders was immense. Yet it worked. The Hurricane's heavy armament could devastate bomber formations, and their stable firing platform meant each burst counted. Nicholson's engagement occurred within this tactical pattern. The Luftwaffe's raid on Southampton was part of a larger offensive designed to cripple Britain's aircraft industry. The German plan assumed that bomber formations protected by Bf 110s could smash airfields faster than the RAF could repair them. But the Hurricanes repeatedly proved them wrong. Their ability to absorb damage and return to fight within hours offset German numerical superiority. A dogfight above Southampton also demonstrated the human dimension of these tactics. Pilots fought under constant fatigue. Many flew 4 or 5 sorties a day, each lasting barely 20 minutes but consuming every ounce of concentration. Ground crews turned the aircraft around between missions, refueling, rearming, patching bullet holes, replacing spark plugs. The simplicity of the Hurricane's design meant this could be done on open fields without hangar facilities. Within 30 minutes, a fighter could be back in the air. It was an engineering advantage multiplied by human endurance. And, after Nicholson's descent and rescue, his injuries were severe: burns to his face, hands, and legs, shrapnel embedded in his body. He spent months in recovery, yet his report of the engagement was factual and unadorned. He described remaining in the burning aircraft to deliver further fire at the enemy, before bailing out. On November 15, 1940, the citation for his Victoria Cross was published, for conspicuous gallantry and devotion to duty and continuing to engage the enemy after his aircraft was set on fire. It was the only such award ever granted to Fighter Command during the Battle of Britain. As Britain moved into the later months of 1940, the pattern repeated itself across the country. Hurricanes continued to meet the bomber streams, absorbing punishment, inflicting damage, and returning to fight again. The Luftwaffe, bleeding aircraft faster than it could replace them, began to falter. The heavy Bf 110 squadrons were withdrawn from daylight operations. What remained was testament to both the tactical resilience of Fighter Command and the engineering foresight of Sidney Cam's creation. The Messerschmitt Bf 1010, at first glance, embodied power and modernity. Twin Daimler-Benz DB601 engines, each generating around 1,100 horsepower, driving the aircraft to speeds exceeding 560 km per hour. It was conceived by German engineers under Willy Messerschmitt as a Zerstörer, a destroyer, a long-range heavy fighter that could escort bombers, outgun single-seat opponents, and still dive like a hawk. In theory, it combined speed, range, and firepower into one fearsome package. In practice, this synthesis came at a cost. The very design that gave the Bf 110 its endurance also burdened it with inertia. 2 engines meant more thrust, but also more weight, more drag, and a wider turn radius. Its wingspan stretched over 16 meters, impressive for stability, but sluggish in close combat. When Nicholson and other Hurricane pilots faced the 110Cs, they discovered that while the German aircraft could race past them, it could rarely stay behind them. The Hurricane's tighter turning radius and lighter frame allowed British pilots to swing inside the German arc, locking guns on target before the Bf 110 could respond. Yet engineering-wise, the Bf 110 was an advanced machine. Its all-metal monocoque structure made it strong and aerodynamic. The twin DB601 engines, with direct fuel injection, offer the decisive advantage in negative G dives. The Hurricane's carbureted Merlin engines momentarily starved of fuel when pushed inverted. German pilots exploited this in hit-and-run tactics, diving away steeply after a burst of fire. For a moment, the 110 could vanish into the clouds, leaving the slower-reacting Hurricanes struggling to follow. It was a battle of philosophies, the British pursuit of agility and resilience versus the German pursuit of power and precision. Nicholson's burning Hurricane and the retreating Messerschmitt symbolized that clash in pure form: endurance against complexity, simplicity against sophistication. If the Bf 110 was the embodiment of industrial ambition, the Hawker Hurricane was the epitome of engineering realism. Its strength lay not in futuristic design, but in the elegant balance between old and new. Sidney Cam's team at Hawker knew that the RAF needed an aircraft that could be mass-produced and maintained with pre-war infrastructure. The result was a hybrid of eras: a metal-framed fuselage covered in fabric aft of the cockpit, and metal wings that housed its 8 Browning machine guns. This semi-monocoque design provided tremendous advantages in the field. Damage to the outer skin could be patched with doped linen and adhesive, rather than specialized tooling. Mechanics stationed at grass airfields could remove panels with simple spanners and replace tubing using common welding kits. The design was so forgiving that hurricanes damaged one day could be flying again the next. Aerodynamically, the Hurricane's thick wing, once criticized for drag, gave it unmatched stability as a gun platform. It could hold steady under recoil, making every burst more accurate. At 340 miles per hour, it was not the fastest aircraft of the Battle of Britain, but it was the most stable. In dogfights, where half a second of precision decided survival, that steadiness proved invaluable. Nicholson's successful aim while engulfed in flame demonstrated that characteristic perfectly. The Hurricane held course even as the cockpit burned. Another overlooked innovation was its control harmony. The combination of manual cable-operated ailerons and a relatively low wing loading made the Hurricane exceptionally responsive to pilot input. It was not agile in the acrobatic sense of the Spitfire, but it allowed controlled, confident maneuvers. A pilot could dive steeply without overloading the wings, pull out cleanly, and still maintain firing alignment. In the Battle of Britain, this translated to a weapon that was not glamorous, but devastatingly practical. In contrast, the Bf 110 reflected Germany's pre-war obsession with multi-role efficiency. The aircraft's fuselage was a masterpiece of modular engineering, detachable engine nacelles, easily replaceable panels, and internal systems designed for swift field maintenance by Luftwaffe standards. Its twin engines offered reliability during long escort missions. If one failed, the aircraft could still limp home. Its twin rudders gave superior yaw control at high speed, stabilizing its heavy nose during firing runs. The cockpit, however, was a two-man environment. The pilot and rear gunner were separated by a narrow central fuselage beam, creating coordination challenges in combat. The rear gunner, often tasked with both defense and radio operation, had limited fields of fire. While the aircraft carried devastating forward armament, typically two 20 mg FF/M cannons and four 7.92 mg MG-17 machine guns, the split cockpit limited visibility and situational awareness. Against the nimble Hurricanes, this proved fatal. Yet, from an engineering perspective, the Bf 110 was years ahead in systems integration. Its DB601 engines employed mechanical fuel injection, enabling uninterrupted power under negative G conditions, a critical advantage in dives and recoveries. Its all-metal stressed skin design provided aerodynamic efficiency superior to the Hurricane's mixed construction. When flown as intended, in coordinated formation with neutral defensive fire, the 110 could be deadly. But alone, as Nicholson's opponent was, it became a technological overreach, exposed by the simplicity of British design. Every aerial duel was, in essence, a contest of aerodynamics. The Hurricane's thick elliptical section wing produced high lift but also higher drag. This made it slower in level flight, but exceptional in sustained turns. It could maintain tight radii at moderate speeds. Conversely, the Bf 110's long, slender wings favored high-speed dives and climbs, built to exploit altitude and momentum rather than turn-fighting agility. During Nicholson's engagement, both designs performed as their engineers intended. The Bf 110s dove to attack the Hurricanes with their superior initial speed. Nicholson's response, a turning counterattack, forced them into their weakest dimension. The Bf 110 could not match the Hurricane's rate of turn, and once it lost speed, it bled energy rapidly due to its mass and drag. In the confined, swirling chaos of close combat, that was a death sentence. Temperature, humidity, and altitude all played roles. The Merlin engine's single-stage supercharger provided peak performance up to around 16,000 feet, exactly the typical altitude of Battle of Britain engagements. The DB601, with its more efficient supercharging, performed better at higher altitudes but was less optimized for Britain's low to mid-level interception fights. Thus, in the skies over Southampton, Nicholson fought in an environment that favored the Hurricane's performance envelope. That advantage was not merely tactical, it was the culmination of design foresight. The RAF had built its aircraft for defense over its own territory, anticipating short-range interceptions. The Luftwaffe, by contrast, designed for long-range offensive missions. The battle over England proved which philosophy was better suited to sustain warfare. After Nicholson's battle, the engineering lessons from such encounters began shaping both sides' future designs. Hawker engineers analyzed returning aircraft, noting where armor plating had saved lives and where fuel lines had failed. Self-sealing fuel tanks, pilot armor, and improved Merlin engines became standard. The Hurricane Mk2, with thicker leading edges and 4 20mm cannons, was born directly from these wartime refinements. The Luftwaffe, too, recognized its miscalculations. The B4110's limitations in daylight escort duty led to its reassignment as a night fighter, a role in which its stability and twin-engine endurance excelled. Engineers added radar sets and flame dampers, turning the 110 into one of the most successful night interceptors of the war. Ironically, what made it vulnerable by day made it formidable by night, and seen what the Luftwaffe would do. For the Hurricane, however, its enduring legacy lay not just in victories, but in its adaptability. From interceptor to ground attack fighter, it evolved seamlessly because its engineering allowed it. Every bolt and beam of Sidney Cam's design carried the logic of practical wartime necessity. It was never the most elegant aircraft, nor the fastest, but it was always there, always flying, always fighting. Unlike the Bf-110 or even the Spitfire, the Hurricane systems were built for accessibility. Mechanics could reach the Merlin engine's main components without special scaffolding or hangars. The hydraulic systems were simple, the control linkages mechanical rather than powered, rugged, reliable, and easily repaired in the field. These traits influenced generations of aircraft that followed. The post-war Hawker Tempest and Sea Theory, and even early jets like the Hawker Hunter, carried forward the same lineage: robust structure, high serviceability, and pellet-first ergonomics. From a design standpoint, the Hurricane was the blueprint for the soldier's aircraft. It proved that survivability, both mechanical and human, could be engineered deliberately, not left to chance. That insight changed the face of air combat engineering forever. 80 years on, the roar of the Hurricane's Rolls-Royce Merlin still echoes at airshows, a living monument to his timeless design. Its simplicity, its strength, and its reliability remind us that great engineering is not about perfection, it's about purpose. James Brindley Nicolson's courage transformed the Hurricane from a machine into a legend. His survival, against all odds, validated everything Sidney Cam and his team had built: a fighter that could take punishment, stay steady, and protect the pilot who flew it. If this video was worth your attention, please like the video and subscribe to this channel so more videos about aviation marvels be brought to you.